Emergency response team, what's the situation?
We need an ambulance now. A trainer's been pulled under.
The beast tries to pin the trainer under the water. Looks like love to me.
Victoria Emergency Services. Please state the nature of your emergency.
It's Sealand, our marine park. One of our trainers.
Until he gathers the strength to jilt Miss...
She's in the whale pool. The orcas, they've got her. They won't let her up.
Are you saying the whales are attacking a trainer?
Yes. She keeps...
Bossy. Poor thing. I hope he lets her down gently.
surfacing, screaming, but they're dragging her under again. We can't get to her.
Nearly impossible to forget the horrific attack earlier this year at SeaWorld. The attack that left a trainer dead, drowned by a killer whale.
What if the animals you trusted most turned out to be the ones that would end your life? Today, I'm going to share 2 terrifying true stories that will change how you think about wild animals forever. These aren't just stories from the news. These are real people whose lives end in the most unthinkable way possible, killed by the very creatures they loved and worked with every single day. The first story is about Jessica Radcliffe, a young woman who spent 12 years building an unbreakable bond with a massive orca whale named Mello. She thought she knew him better than anyone in the world. She was wrong. The second story involves Daniel Patrick Dukes, a man whose reckless decision to swim with an orca in the middle of the night led to one of the most shocking deaths ever recorded at a marine park. Both of these stories will make your heart race and your blood run cold. They remind us that no matter how much we think we understand wild animals, they are still wild. And sometimes that wildness can turn deadly in ways we never expect. So buckle up, because these stories are about to take you on a journey you'll never forget. Jessica Radcliffe grew up in a world surrounded by ocean life. Her father was a marine biologist who dedicated his life to studying sea creatures, and from the time Jessica was a little girl, she was fascinated by everything he did. While other kids her age were playing with toys, Jessica was watching her father work with dolphins, whales, and other amazing sea animals in his research laboratory. Every day after school, Jessica would rush to her father's lab to see what new creatures he was studying. She would watch him take notes, measure the animals, and observe their behavior. But Jessica didn't just watch from a distance. She had something special about her, something that made animals trust her almost immediately. Even the most nervous sea creatures would calm down when she was around. As Jessica got older, her love for marine animals only grew stronger. When she turned 16, her father started taking her on research trips out into the ocean. These weren't fun family vacations. These were serious scientific expeditions where researchers studied whales and dolphins in their natural habitat. But for Jessica, these trips were like living in a dream. Out on the ocean, Jessica discovered that she had an incredible gift. She could communicate with dolphins using hand signals and body language. The dolphins seemed to understand her perfectly, and she could get them to swim in certain patterns or come closer to the research boat just by moving her hands in specific ways. Even the experienced researchers were amazed by what they saw. One day, when Jessica was 17, her father took her to visit Ocean Haven Marine Park. This was one of the most famous marine parks in the country, known for having the biggest and most spectacular orca shows anywhere. Jessica had seen pictures of orcas before, but she had never seen one up close. The moment Jessica walked into the stadium and saw her first orca show, her life changed forever. The massive black and white whales were incredible. They were so much bigger than she had ever imagined, weighing thousands of pounds and measuring over 20 feet long. But what amazed her most was how graceful they were in the water and how well they worked with their trainers. Watching the trainers work with these giant creatures, Jessica knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to become an orca trainer. She wanted to work with these magnificent animals every single day and share their beauty with thousands of people who came to watch the shows. After finishing high school, Jessica enrolled in a marine biology program at a local university. She studied harder than she had ever studied in her life because she knew that becoming an orca trainer required more than just love for animals. She needed to understand their behavior, their biology, and their psychology. She needed to learn how to keep them healthy and happy in captivity. During her college years, Jessica spent every summer working as an intern at Ocean Haven Marine Park. She started by cleaning tanks and preparing food for the animals, but the senior trainers quickly noticed her special talent with marine creatures. By her second summer, they were letting her help with some of the smaller animals like seals and sea lions. Jessica was a natural. The animals responded to her in ways that impressed everyone who worked at the park. She seemed to have an instinct for knowing what each animal needed and how to make them feel comfortable and safe. Her supervisors knew they were watching someone truly special. When Jessica graduated from college at age 21, Ocean Haven Marine Park offered her a full-time position as an orca trainer. It was a dream come true. She would be working with the park's most famous attraction, and she would be performing in front of thousands of people every single week. The park assigned Jessica to work with an orca named Mello. Mello was enormous, even by orca standards. He measured 22 feet from nose to tail and weighed over 12,000 pounds. He was one of the park's star performers, known for his incredible jumps and his ability to splash the audience with perfectly timed tail movements. When Jessica first met Mello, she was both excited and nervous. Mello was not just big, he was massive. Standing next to his tank, Jessica felt tiny. But as she began working with him, something magical happened. Mello seemed to recognize that Jessica was different from the other trainers he had worked with before. Over the next few months, Jessica and Mello developed an incredible partnership. Jessica would spend hours every day training with him, teaching him new tricks and perfecting the ones he already knew. But their relationship went deeper than just trainer and animal. They seemed to genuinely care about each other. Mello would get excited when he saw Jessica arriving at work each morning. He would swim to the edge of his tank and make clicking sounds to get her attention. Jessica would talk to him in a soft, gentle voice, and Mello would respond by moving his head or making different sounds back to her. The shows they performed together were absolutely spectacular. Jessica would start each show by having Mello swim around the tank, while she explained to the audience about orca behavior and intelligence. Then they would move into the more exciting parts of the performance. Mello could leap completely out of the water, his massive body soaring through the air before crashing back down and sending waves of water over the first few rows of the audience. Kids would scream with delight, and adults would gasp in amazement. Jessica would ride on Mello's back as he swam around the tank, and she would even put her head inside his mouth to show how much trust existed between them. For over 10 years, Jessica and Mello were the most popular act at Ocean Haven Marine Park. People would travel from hundreds of miles away just to see their show. Jessica became famous in the marine park world, and Mello was featured in magazines and television documentaries about life in captivity. But as the years went by, some people who worked closely with Mello began to notice changes in his behavior. Sometimes he would refuse to eat his fish, which was very unusual for an orca. Other times he would float motionlessly in his tank for hours, not responding to anyone who called his name. At night, after the park had closed and all the visitors had gone home, security guards reported hearing strange sounds coming from Mello's tank. They would find him swimming in tight circles or hitting his head against the walls of his enclosure. Some nights, the concrete walls would be scratched and scraped from where Mello had been rubbing against them. The veterinarians who examined Mello said he was physically healthy, but they were concerned about signs of psychological stress. They recommended giving him more space, more stimulation, and possibly pairing him with another orca for companionship. But the park management was reluctant to make expensive changes to their most popular attraction. Jessica noticed the changes in Mello's behavior too, but she believed that their strong relationship would help him through whatever he was experiencing. She spent extra time with him after shows, talking to him and trying to keep him calm and happy. She truly believed that their bond was strong enough to overcome any problems. Then came the day that would change everything forever. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon in late summer. The stadium was packed with over 3,000 people who had come to see Jessica and Melo's show. Families with children filled the seats, and the excitement in the air was electric. Jessica's own parents had driven down from their home several hours away to watch their daughter perform. The show started perfectly. Jessica and Melo went through their routine flawlessly. Melo jumped on command, splashed the audience at exactly the right moments, and responded to every signal Jessica gave him. The crowd was loving every minute of it, cheering and applauding after each trick. Jessica was feeling confident and happy. This was what she lived for, sharing her love of these incredible animals with thousands of people and showing them how intelligent and beautiful orcas could be. She and Melo were at the peak of their performance, working together like they had done hundreds of times before. As they approached the grand finale of the show, Jessica prepared for their most spectacular trick. She would climb onto Melo's back, and he would swim her around the entire tank while she waved the audience. It was a crowd favorite, and the perfect way to end their performance. Jessica gave Melo the signal, and he swam over the platform where she was standing. She climbed onto his back, just like she had done countless times before. The audience held its breath in anticipation as Melo began to swim around the tank with Jessica riding on his back. Everything was going exactly as planned until they reached the center of the tank. Without any warning, without any signal from Jessica, Melo suddenly stopped swimming. For a moment, Jessica thought maybe he was just pausing for dramatic effect, something he had done before during their shows. But then, in an instant that would haunt everyone who witnessed it for the rest of their lives, Melo turned his massive head and grabbed Jessica around her waist with his jaws. The stadium erupted in screams of horror. At first, some people in the audience thought this might be part of the show, some new trick they had never seen before. But the other trainers standing around the tank immediately knew that something was terribly wrong. Their faces turned white with terror, and they began shouting commands at Melo to let Jessica go. Jessica was trapped in Melo's mouth, and there was nothing she could do to escape. Orca jaws are incredibly powerful, designed to catch and hold large fish and seals in the wild. Once Melo had her in his grip, Jessica had no hope of breaking free on her own. The other trainers at the park sprang into action, throwing ropes and nets into the water, hoping to distract Melo and get him to release Jessica. They tossed buckets of his favorite fish into the tank, trying anything they could think of to get his attention. But nothing worked. Melo seemed completely focused on Jessica, ignoring everything else around him. Then, to the horror of everyone watching, Melo dove underwater, taking Jessica with him. He swam to the bottom of the tank and began thrashing back and forth, slamming Jessica's body against the concrete walls of his enclosure. The force of these impacts was devastating, breaking several of Jessica's ribs and causing massive internal injuries. Two of the bravest trainers prepared to jump into the water with long poles, hoping they could somehow force Melo to release Jessica. But before they could act, Melo surfaced again, still holding Jessica in his jaws. The water around them was beginning to turn red with blood. Jessica's parents, who had been sitting in the front row proudly watching their daughter perform, were now witnessing the most horrible thing any parent could ever see. The entire stadium was in chaos, with people screaming, crying, and trying to get their children out of the arena as quickly as possible. The park's emergency response team finally arrived with a hydraulic net system designed to restrain large marine animals. It took several agonizing minutes, but they were eventually able to force Melo into a corner of the tank and secure the net around him. Only then did he finally release Jessica from his jaws. Jessica was immediately pulled from the water and rushed to the park's medical facility. Paramedics worked desperately to save her life, but the damage was too severe. Her ribs were crushed, her lungs were filled with water and blood, and she had lost an enormous amount of blood from the deep wounds Melo's teeth had inflicted. She was transported to the nearest hospital by helicopter, but despite the efforts of the best trauma doctors in the area, Jessica was pronounced dead less than an hour after the attack. The official cause of death was drowning and massive blood loss from her injuries. The entire marine park industry was shocked by Jessica's death. Ocean Haven Marine Park was closed permanently just days after the tragedy, and Melo was relocated to a marine research facility where he lived alone for the remainder of his life. But Jessica's story isn't the only tragic tale of humans who underestimated the wild nature of these massive creatures. Daniel Patrick Dukes was a troubled man whose poor decisions throughout his life led him down a path that would end in one of the most shocking deaths ever recorded at Marine Park. Unlike Jessica, who dedicated her life to understanding and caring for marine animals, Daniel was someone who lived recklessly and often found himself in trouble with the law. Daniel had struggled with drug addiction for most of his adult life. He was known to police for various petty crimes like theft and trespassing, and he had a history of making impulsive decisions that put himself and others in danger. His addiction had cost him jobs, relationships, and any chance of living a normal, stable life. In the summer of 1999, Daniel was living as a drifter, moving from place to place with no permanent address and no steady income. He survived by doing odd jobs when he could find them, and sometimes by stealing what he needed. His appearance reflected his lifestyle. He was often dirty and unkempt, and his behavior was unpredictable due to his ongoing drug use. On July 6, 1999, Daniel found himself outside the gates of SeaWorld, one of the most famous marine parks in the world. He had heard about the incredible orca shows that took place there, and in his drug-influenced state of mind, he decided he wanted to see one of these shows for himself. The problem was that Daniel had no money to buy a ticket. Admission to SeaWorld was expensive, and Daniel hadn't had a steady income in months. But rather than simply walking away and forgetting about the idea, Daniel decided to sneak into the park illegally. During the busy afternoon hours when families were arriving for the shows, Daniel found a section of the park's perimeter fence that wasn't being closely watched by security. He climbed over the wall and dropped down into the park grounds, successfully avoiding the main entrance where he would have needed to pay for admission. Once inside the park, Daniel tried his best to blend in with the other visitors, but his appearance made this difficult. He was dirty. His clothes were wrinkled and stained, and he had the unmistakable smell of someone who hadn't bathed in several days. Other visitors instinctively moved away from him, not wanting to sit near him during the shows. Daniel managed to watch one of the afternoon orca performances, but the combination of his drug use and exhaustion from living on the streets caught up with him. During the show, he found a quiet spot under some bleacher seats and fell asleep. He slept through the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, completely unaware of the activity going on around him. When Daniel finally woke up, the sun had set and the park was nearly empty. The last show of the day had ended hours earlier, and most of the visitors had already gone home. The only people left in the park were maintenance workers and security guards making their final rounds of the evening. As Daniel wandered around the now-quiet park, a security guard spotted him and approached to ask what he was doing there so late. Daniel, still not thinking clearly due to his drug use, made up a story about knowing the owner of the park personally. He claimed he had been invited to stay after hours as a special guest. The security guard was skeptical, but Daniel was convincing enough that the guard decided to let him stay for a little while longer rather than immediately escorting him out of the park. This decision would prove to be fatal. With the security guard gone, Daniel continued exploring the empty park. The pathways that had been crowded with families just hours earlier were now dark and deserted. The only sounds were the distant hum of filtration systems and the occasional splash of water from the various animal enclosures. Eventually, Daniel found himself standing next to one of the park's largest orca tanks. The massive pool was dimly lit, with just enough light for Daniel to see the dark shape of an enormous orca floating peacefully in the water. The whale appeared to be resting, moving slowly and quietly through its enclosure. In what can only be described as an incredibly poor decision influenced by drugs and poor judgment, Daniel decided it would be fun to go for a swim. He began taking off his clothes, piece by piece, until he was completely naked. Then, without any thought for consequences, he jumped into the orca tank. The water was shockingly cold, and the splash Daniel made when he hit the surface immediately woke the orca from its peaceful rest. The massive whale, startled by the sudden intrusion into its territory, began swimming toward the source of the disturbance. Daniel was treading water in the center of the tank, probably thinking he was having the adventure of a lifetime. He had no way of knowing that orcas in captivity can become extremely territorial about their living space, especially when confronted with an unexpected intruder during their rest period. As the orca swam closer, Daniel finally began to realize that he might have made a serious mistake. Even in his drug-impaired state, He could see that the animal approaching him was massive, much larger than he had imagined when he was looking at it from outside the tank. Daniel tried to swim toward the edge of the tank, but it was too late. The orca reached him before he could get to safety. What happened next was swift and brutal. The orca grabbed Daniel in its powerful jaws, just as it would grab a seal or a large fish in the wild. Daniel's screams echoed across the empty park, but there was no one nearby to hear them or come to his rescue. The night security guards were on the other side of the facility, completely unaware of what was happening. The attack was devastating. The orca's jaws crushed several of Daniel's ribs immediately, and its teeth tore deep gashes in his chest and abdomen. The force of the bite was so powerful that Daniel had no chance of escaping on his own. Like Mello had done with Jessica, this orca dragged Daniel underwater and began thrashing him against the walls of the tank. The concrete surface scraped away his skin and caused additional injuries that filled the water with blood. Daniel lost consciousness quickly, and within minutes, he had drowned. The orca eventually released Daniel's body, which floated to the surface of the now blood-red water. Daniel remained floating in the tank throughout the entire night, undiscovered by anyone. When the morning shift of trainers arrived at work the next day, they were greeted by a horrific scene. The water in one of their main orca tanks was stained red with blood, and floating in the center was the lifeless body of a man they had never seen before. The trainers immediately called for emergency medical assistance and park security, but it was obvious that the man had been dead for many hours. The orca responsible for Daniel's death was swimming calmly in its tank, showing no signs of distress or unusual behavior. An investigation revealed Daniel's identity and pieced together the events that had led to his death. Security footage showed him climbing over the park's fence, sleeping under the bleachers, and eventually making his way to the orca tank in the middle of the night. The tragedy could have been prevented in so many ways. If Daniel had not been using drugs, he might have made better decisions about his safety. If the security guard had been more thorough in checking Daniel's story about knowing the park owner, he would have been removed from the premises before nightfall. If Daniel had simply looked at the orca tank and walked away instead of deciding to go for a swim, he would still be alive today. Both Jessica's and Daniel's deaths serve as powerful reminders about the true nature of wild animals, even those that have lived in captivity for many years. Jessica spent over a decade building a relationship with Mello, and she genuinely believed that their bond would keep her safe. Daniel made a spontaneous decision to enter an orca's territory without any understanding of the potential consequences. In both cases, the outcome was the same. These massive, powerful creatures acted according to their wild instincts, with tragic results for humans involved. The deaths of Jessica Radcliffe and Daniel Patrick Dukes changed the marine park industry forever. New safety protocols were put in place to protect both trainers and visitors. Many parks stopped allowing trainers to perform in the water with orcas, instead keeping all interactions to poolside training sessions. These stories remind us that no matter how much we love wild animals, no matter how much we study them or work with them, they will always be wild at heart. They are not pets, and they are not our friends in the way we understand friendship. They are magnificent, powerful creatures that deserve our respect and our caution. The next time you visit a marine park or watch a nature documentary about whales and dolphins, remember Jessica and Daniel. Remember that the beauty and grace of these animals comes with an element of danger that can never be completely eliminated. Their stories are tragic, but they serve an important purpose. They teach us to appreciate wild animals from a safe distance and to never forget that nature, no matter how beautiful, can also be deadly. If these stories have made an impact on you, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had an experience with a wild animal that made you realize how unpredictable they can be? Do you think marine parks should continue to exist, or should these animals only be observed in their natural habitats? Please hit that like button if this video opened your eyes to something new, and don't forget to share it with anyone who loves animals or needs to understand the importance of respecting wildlife. Subscribe to my channel for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world around you. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload, because I promise you, the stories I share will stay with you long after you finish watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never forget that the natural world is both beautiful and dangerous in ways we're still learning to understand.